Hopkins but broke it off with him after watching The Silence of the Lambs. She says she couldn't separate Hopkins from his cannibalistic character Hannibal Lecter. RFK's assassin Sirhan Sirhan is still alive today and has been denied parole 17 times. According to historians, we would have a lot more Egyptian mummies intact today if so many of them weren't eaten during the Victorian era. People used to believe that the ground-up corpses of ancient Egyptians could cure different ailments. Harvey Weinstein reportedly had gangrene around his private area, giving his shaft a Frankenstein look that appeared as if it was chopped off and sewn back on. His ghoulies were also removed during treatment of his gangrene, leading to several of his victims suspecting that he was intersex. When Roman Emperor Commodus was in power, he had his men gather all the dwarves and disabled people they could find around the city. They were brought to the Colosseum, where each of them was given a meat cleaver and forced to fight to the death. Right after purchasing some hot coffee from McDonald's in 2004, 79-year-old Stella Liebeck accidentally spilled it into her lap, causing horrific third-degree burns. The woman quickly went into shock and was hospitalized for 8 days while undergoing skin grafts. Since the burns were so bad, her lady parts had melted and fused to her legs. Stella suffered permanent disfigurement after the incident and was partially disabled for 2 years. She then sued McDonald's for making the coffee way too hot and was only seeking $20,000 to cover her medical bills. But McDonald's refused to settle with Stella as the media completely demonized her, calling her the poster child of frivolous lawsuits. However, people quickly changed their tune when photos of the horrific burns finally released. With one of the jurors being so traumatized, he forced his wife to quit drinking hot coffee. Stella ended up winning $2.9 million in damages from the lawsuit, but her life was never the same again. In 2016, Texas father Daniel Shaver was held up by police after he was seen pointing a pellet gun out of his hotel window. Several officers had rifles pointed at Schaefer in the hallway as he attempted to comply with them, but their commands were confusing and contradictory, especially since Shaver was drunk. For example, they told Shaver not to put his hands down for any reason before telling him to start crawling towards them. As Shaver was crawling and begging for his life, he reached back to pull his pants up and was killed instantly by Officer Philip Brailsford, who later claimed he thought Shaver was reaching for a weapon. Brailsford was charged with second-degree murder and found not guilty, since the full unedited footage wasn't released until hours after his acquittal. Brailsford was rehired by the department and reimbursed for all the medical expenses he paid while seeking treatment for the PTSD he claimed he acquired from the shooting. Because of this, Brailsford was medically retired and now collects a $2,500 pension every month. Morbid Facts, Part 141. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. Researchers would later discover that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Unlike male bodies, female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose. The only reason this was done was to prevent the embalmers from getting weird with the bodies. Children who are victims of hot car deaths are often found with large portions of their hair ripped out. The only reason dogs love squeaky toys is because they sound like little animals dying. Every unborn baby grows a mustache in the womb, which then spreads to cover the entire body. The baby then eats this fine hair called lanugo, then excretes it after birth with their first bowel movement. Morbid Facts, Part 143. In 2012, a Jesus statue in India had water mysteriously dripping from its toes. Worshippers flocked from all over to collect and sometimes drink this miracle water. But soon enough, the source of the water was found to be a clogged toilet near the statue. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 2. Terry Kath, the original lead singer of the band Chicago, died after accidentally shooting himself in the head. In 1978, he picked up a 9mm pistol and said, "Don't worry about it, look, the clip's not even in it." He held the gun to his head, and before pulling the trigger, his last words were, "What do you think I'm gonna do, blow my brains out?" There was a bullet in the chamber and he died instantly. In 1834, a 13-year-old boy died in San Francisco after a circus clown swung him around by the heels. In 2007, California woman Jennifer Strange entered a radio show contest called Hold Your Wee for a Wee, in which the person who drank the most water over a 4-hour span without urinating would win a Nintendo Wii. But after consuming nearly 2 gallons, Jennifer soon complained of headaches and dizziness before dying a few hours later from water poisoning. After the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Chinese government sent bills to the families of the protesters for the cost of the bullets used to kill their loved ones. Over the last 10 years, about 10 Americans have been accidentally shot by dogs. 5 of them happened in Florida. Jeremy Rodale was a longevity expert who popularized the term organic food. While filming an interview for the Dick Cavett Show, he declared, "I've decided to live to be 100 and I've never felt better in my life." But minutes later, Rodale died of a heart attack while still being filmed. Morbid Facts, Part 144. In 1978, 15-year-old Mary Vincent was hitchhiking in California when she was picked up by 56-year-old Larry Singleton. The man eventually knocked her out with a sledgehammer and sexually assaulted her that night. The next day, he cut off both her arms with a hatchet and threw her into a ditch to die. But Mary managed to pack her stumps with blood to stop the bleeding and spent all night crawling out. She eventually made it to the highway and started walking, naked and covered in blood. The first car that saw her sped away in horror. The second car was a couple on their honeymoon who picked her up and she survived. Singleton was sentenced to 14 years in prison but was released 6 years early due to good behavior. He would go on to murder a different woman named Roxanne Hayes a few years later. Morbid Facts, Part 145. In 1903, Topsy the elephant was executed by poisoning, strangulation, and electrocution. A 74-second video of the electrocution was recorded and preserved by Thomas Edison. It may have been the first time ever that death was captured in a motion picture film. In 1854, a 13-year-old boy died in San Francisco after a circus clown swung him around by the heels. A Frenchman named Tarare was famous in the 1700s for his endless appetite. He was reported to have eaten live snakes, cats, lizards, and puppies. In one case, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting. While being treated in a hospital for his condition, he was caught trying to drink other patients' blood and eat corpses from the morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. Morbid Facts, Part 147. In 1991, Patricia Stallings was sentenced to life in prison for poisoning her child with antifreeze. She then gave birth to a second child while in prison, who was given to a foster care. But he eventually became sick with the same symptoms as the first child, indicating a rare metabolic disorder, not poisoning. This proved her innocence and she was later released. In a Mexican prison in 2020, 2 rival drug cartels decided to have a friendly soccer match. Things must have gotten out of hand pretty quickly since the match ended with 16 people dead. Weird crime facts. There's a tree in Pakistan that has been chained and officially arrested since 1898. This happened when a drunk British officer thought the tree was moving toward him, so he ordered a sergeant to arrest it. In 2004, this woman from Georgia tried to use a fake $1 million bill to buy $2,000 worth of products from Walmart. She said she thought the bill was real and expected $998,000 in change. In 2008, an entire beach was stolen from a resort in Jamaica. No arrests were ever made and 500 truckloads of sand remain missing to this day. 34-year-old Vladimir Sankin is facing 15 years in prison after beating a pedophile to death. He did this after learning that children were being lured to the pedophile's house before being given alcohol and forced to strip naked. In 1975, it was revealed that the CIA had developed a heart attack gun that fired a dart of frozen water and shellfish toxin. Once inside the body, it would melt, leaving only a small red mark on the victim. The official cause of death would always be a heart attack. Morbid Facts, Part 149. While getting into character for the Jobs movie, Ashton Kutcher tried Steve Jobs' diet, but he ended up in a hospital because it messed with his pancreas levels. It's likely no coincidence that Steve Jobs died from pancreatic cancer. Albert Einstein's last words were lost forever because he said them in German, which the nurse attending to him did not speak. The disclaimer of no animals were harmed during the making of this film isn't always true. It can be put on movies even if animals died during the production, as long as cameras weren't rolling at the time. The Heart Attack Grill is a restaurant in Las Vegas where people weighing over 350 pounds can eat for free. 3 people have died while eating there, and the only vegan option on the menu is cigarettes. This was painted by serial killer John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown, while in prison. It depicts him as Snow White and expresses the strange obsession he had with the 7 dwarves. President FDR was having a portrait painted of himself when he suffered a stroke. He died later that day, and this unfinished portrait captured his final waking moments. These are some of the weirdest books in the world. Codex Gigas, aka the Devil's Bible, is the largest medieval book in the world, weighing in at 165 pounds. Its author is unknown, but it's estimated that it would have taken at least 30 years to complete. Legend tells that the scribe sold his soul to the devil so that he could write the book in one night. The Voynich manuscript is a 15th century codex of unknown origins. It features a mystery language and illustrations of plants that don't exist. Hundreds of codebreakers have attempted to decipher its meaning, but none have been successful. Codex Seraphinianus is a beautifully drawn encyclopedia of an unknown world. It's also written in a cryptic language, as even the author himself can't decipher it. He claims that the real author was a possessed cat who telepathically guided his hands and thoughts. These are some of the weirdest cemeteries in the world. It's illegal to be buried in Longyearbyen, Norway. The town's only graveyard closed over 70 years ago because it's so cold there that the bodies never decomposed. And some still carry traces of the Spanish flu. While it looks like a city, this is actually the largest cemetery in the world, located in Iraq. Graveyards can be boring for kids, which is why they built a playground at Alabama's Maple Hill Cemetery. But as most people expected, it didn't get much use because it's insanely creepy and is known today as Dead Children's Playground. Upon first glance, this cemetery in Maine looks like 2 pictures put together. This cemetery in New Haven, Connecticut was once part of an outdoor graveyard in the center of town. But eventually a church was built over the cemetery, and the graves have resided untouched in the basement since the 1800s. Weird war facts. In 1932, Australia declared war on about 20,000 emus that were destroying farmland. While a number of birds were killed, the emu population persisted and ended up winning the war. Switzerland's military has remained neutral since 1815, but the entire country is rigged to explode. Thousands of demolition points are wired into bridges, highways, and railroads across the nation to quickly halt invaders. Morbid facts, part 150. In her Firefox search history, Casey Anthony had foolproof suffocation methods from the day before her daughter died. But police overlooked this evidence because they only checked her search history from Internet Explorer. Throughout his life, Ernest Hemingway survived malaria, anthrax, pneumonia, dysentery, skin cancer, diabetes, hepatitis, a ruptured kidney, spleen, and liver, a crushed vertebrae, and a fractured skull. He also survived 2 separate plane crashes in a 2-day span while on an African safari. In 2013, a French businessman died of a heart attack while having an affair with a stranger during a company trip. A French court ruled that this was an industrial accident and that his wife and family were entitled to compensation. Morbid facts, part 151. The death of Metallica singer James Hetfield's mom inspired him to write the song The God That Failed. She died when he was 16 due to Christian beliefs influencing her to reject cancer treatment. In 1999, a waitress was tipped a lottery ticket and won $10 million. She was then sued by her colleagues for their share. Afterwards, she was sued by the man who tipped her the ticket. Then she was kidnapped by her ex-husband and ended up shooting him in the chest. Lastly, she went to court against the IRS for more than a decade before finally winning. In 1825, painter Samuel Morse received a letter which read that his wife was sick. The next day, he received a new letter which read that she had died. 2 days later, he went to see his wife one last time only to discover she had already been buried. Distraught over the slowness of long-distance communication, he invented the Morse code. During World War II, German tank drivers in Africa would drive over camel poop for good luck. The Allies caught wind of this and responded by planting landmines disguised as camel poop. Once the Germans realized this, they began running over piles that already had tire tracks over them. In turn, the Allies made mines that looked like overrun camel poop. Weird crime facts. In 1996, a man's body floated up to a boat in the UK seas. There was no identification on the body except for a 25-year-old Rolex Oyster on his wrist. As Rolex maintained such meticulous service records, they were able to identify the victim and ultimately the killer. On average, men receive 63% longer sentences than females for the exact same crime. Nigerian scammers once sold a fake airport to a major international bank for $242 million. The scam wasn't discovered until 3 years later. Portugal decriminalized all drugs 20 years ago and has viewed addiction as a public health crisis rather than a crime. Ever since then, Portugal has had one of the lowest percentages of drug addicts in all of Europe. Weird crime fact. This is a photo of a New York City police officer coming face to face with a 350-pound tiger that was secretly living in a Harlem apartment. It took more than 6 men to carry the tiger into the elevator while he was sedated. In 1986, a French convict used oranges painted as grenades to escape from prison. He was picked up in a helicopter piloted by his wife, who had been taking flight lessons for months just for the escape. For decades, a female serial killer named the Phantom of Heilbronn was linked to more than 40 crimes. In 2009, it was discovered that she never existed and her DNA was simply contamination from the cotton swabs used at crime scenes. In 2010, 3 burglars thought they had found a stash of cocaine after breaking into a Florida woman's home. They ended up snorting the ashes of a man and his 2 Great Danes. Weird nature facts. If you ever see a kangaroo standing in the water like this, you should get out of there immediately. He's likely waiting for a pursuer to join him in the water so that he can drown it. It was developed as a defense mechanism against dingoes, but has been performed on innocent household dogs. This skull-faced caterpillar is the larva of the pink underwing moth. It can be found in the rainforests of Australia. This cow escaped from a Polish farm and was found months later living with a herd of wild bison. A few years ago, there was a global search to find a mate for Jeremy, a snail with a rare genetic deformity. Because his shell coiled counterclockwise, the opposite of what's typical for snails, his sex organs couldn't align with any others. 2 candidates were eventually found, but they proceeded to mate with each other instead of poor Jeremy. Insane coincidences. In late 1864, the brother of John Wilkes Booth was boarding a train when he noticed a man was about to be crushed by the car. So he quickly grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him to safety. The man he'd saved was Robert Lincoln, the son of the president who would be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth just months later. In 1903, a pair of nearly identical strangers named Will West and William West ended up in the same Kansas prison. This case was a big part of the reason why fingerprints are now used for identification. In 2019, a young man named Tyler Moon was running in a Minneapolis marathon when he suddenly collapsed. Thankfully, he was wearing a Jesus Saves running bib since the man behind him was a nurse who performed CPR and saved his life. The nurse's first name was Jesus. Weird space facts. Judith Love Cohen was an American engineer who helped create the guidance system that brought Apollo 13 back home safely. While working on a crucial equation one day, she went into labor but took the problem with her to the hospital. She soon called her boss to tell him that she finished it. Then she gave birth to Jack Black. NASA employs a man named George Aldridge to sniff everything before they send it to space. If George doesn't like the smell, it doesn't go to space. The Kessler syndrome is the theory that a small collision of our satellites could cause a major catastrophe for humanity. The collision could create a cascade where satellites break into tiny pieces and destroy other satellites, until the Earth is surrounded by a massive cloud of flying shrapnel. This would make it impossible to leave the planet for many generations. Weird crime fact. In the year 2000, this man was given a 13-year sentence for armed robbery, but the state of Missouri somehow forgot to put him in prison. They only noticed the error 13 years later when it was time for his release. After being apprehended, he was officially freed when the courts determined he was a changed man. In Brazilian prisons, inmates can shorten their sentences by reading. For every book they read and write a report on, their sentences can be reduced by up to 4 days. The world's most wanted hacker was eventually hacked and arrested because his password was his cat's name plus 123. In 2018, the world's most expensive bottle of vodka was stolen in Denmark. The bottle was made from silver and gold and had a diamond-encrusted cap, making it worth $1.3 million. Miraculously, it was found empty on a construction site just a few days later. Weird nature fact. This extremely rare red Sprite lightning was captured over Texas last year. This happens when a strong bolt of lightning is positively charged instead of negative. This Sprite was estimated to be about 30 miles tall. Jonathan the Tortoise was born in 1832, 5 years before the Victorian era even started. Next year, he will turn 190, making him the oldest known land animal alive today. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 5. In 2008, a Brazilian priest strapped 1,000 balloons onto a lawn chair and rode it into the sky as part of a fundraiser. He was able to reach an altitude of around 20,000 feet before losing contact with authorities. Over a month later, the lower half of his body was found floating near an oil rig. British entrepreneur Jimmy Heselden became the CEO of Segway Inc. after purchasing the company in 2009. The next year, he died from blunt force trauma after falling off a cliff on a Segway. Every year, about 150 people are killed by falling coconuts across the globe. Famous whiskey distiller Jack Daniel died after kicking his safe in frustration because he forgot his combination. He injured his big toe and it got infected, so he had to have his entire foot amputated. But the infection spread to the rest of his body and he died from blood poisoning. Here are some of the craziest things that were discovered by accident. In 1965, a Ukrainian farmer dug up the lower jawbone of a mammoth. Further excavations revealed 4 huts that were made completely out of mammoth bones. They're estimated to be around 15,000 years old. This 110-million-year-old nodosaur fossil is so well preserved that many scientists refer to it as a mummy. It was accidentally discovered by miners in Canada who initially thought it was just a weird rock formation. These heart-shaped amethyst geodes were discovered just a few months ago by a mining company in Uruguay. A group of archaeologists discovered this massive claw while digging down in a cave in New Zealand. Turns out it was the 3,300-year-old claw of a moa bird which went extinct centuries ago. Paintings with disturbing backstories. Painting was created by Maria Farmer, the first victim to speak out against Jeffrey Epstein. She claims this is an FBI diagram of the circle of connections to Epstein. It features people like the Clintons, Bill Gates, and the Rothschilds, and depicts Ghislaine Maxwell as a bloodthirsty reptile. Artist William Udermolen was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1995. Over the next 5 years, he drew these self-portraits of himself, which display the devastating effects of the disease. In 2012, French beekeepers couldn't figure out why their bees were producing blue and green honey inside their hives. That was until they discovered that the bees were visiting a local factory that produces M&Ms. Naked mole rats don't feel pain, can survive 18 minutes without oxygen, and are completely immune to cancer. They're also the only mammals that live in colonies like bees or ants, with one large queen mole rat who gives birth to all the others. Insane coincidences. A woman snorkeling near Australia noticed this fish was wearing a gold wedding ring. She says she tried to catch it, but it swam away too quickly. A woman from Michigan gave birth on 8808, 9909, and 101010. The odds of this happening were 50 million to 1. A man was photographing a plane crossing over a rainbow when it was struck by lightning at the exact same time. This little girl was born with the exact same white patch of hair as her mother. In 2009, a man was kidnapped in Mexico immediately after giving a lecture on how not to be kidnapped in Mexico. In 1970, a dead sperm whale was blown up with dynamite and chunks of its flesh were launched up to 700 feet away. One of the pieces destroyed a brand new car that was purchased during a promotion called Get a Whale of a Deal. Weird nature fact. In 2004, a baby hippo named Owen was swept away from his mother during a tsunami. He then mistook a 130-year-old tortoise for another hippo and the two became best friends. Blood Falls is a glacier in Antarctica that pours out red plumes of liquid, making it look like the ice is bleeding. In the 1970s, 2 communities of chimpanzees that were once unified went to war with each other. It lasted 4 years and included many violent fights, murders, and kidnappings. It is the only documented war among chimpanzees in the wild. The dog on the left is an award-winning French bulldog named Arnie. On the right is also a French bulldog, but he was bred in Holland by Hallbuck's Kennel. They're a breeder trying to establish a new, healthier template for French bulldog. Hagfish are ancient eel-shaped fish that secrete a thick slime when threatened. In 2017, a truck full of them crashed on a highway in Oregon, creating one of the most bizarre traffic jams you'll ever see. A cow from Bangladesh named Rani is the smallest adult cow in the world. He is less than 2 feet tall and only weighs about 60 pounds. The albatross has the largest wingspan of any bird and can fly for years without landing. They spend their first 6 years of life flying over the ocean without ever touching the ground. These claws of the southern cassowary are proof that birds are definitely descendants of dinosaurs. Black ivory is one of the most expensive coffee beans in the world, costing about $500 per pound. It is made from beans that can only be found in elephant poop. Weird crime fact. This is a photo of Jason Vukovic smiling at his brother after being sentenced to 28 years in prison. Vukovic tracked down registered sex offenders before assaulting and robbing them. He would then give the money to single mothers that he knew. Both he and his brother were sexually abused as children. This is the cabin of Unabomber Ted Kaczynski when it was held in an FBI storage facility in California. Ted Bundy removed the seat of his Volkswagen Beetle so that his victims couldn't be seen while he was driving. In Chicago 1926, famous piano player Fats Waller was kidnapped by gangsters for 3 days. He feared for his life until finding out that he was the surprise guest at Al Capone's birthday party. When he was found, he was extremely drunk and had earned thousands of dollars in tips from the partygoers. Weirdest nature fact. Dolphins love interacting with pregnant women because they communicate using ultrasound. Not only can they hear the mother's heartbeat, but also the baby's, and they find this very fascinating. When mating, flatworms engage in violent penis fencing to determine who will be the father. The winner who stabs the other with its pecker remains a male while the loser becomes a female. Cockroaches find humans so disgusting that if they touch you, they will run away and clean themselves immediately. If a female fox dies, their mate will stay single forever. But if a male fox dies, his widow will search for a new mate immediately. Sharks have survived 4 out of the 5 mass extinction events and have been around for more than 400 million years. This means they're older than dinosaurs, older than trees, and even older than your mom. Weird crime fact. This is a photo of a stripper posing in front of a judge in 1983. She was displaying that her bikini briefs were too large to expose her cooter to the undercover cops who arrested her. After a meticulous examination by the judge, the case was dismissed. In 2014, a man from Arizona stole a diamond worth $160,000 and traded it for $20 worth of weed. A group of thieves in England posed as mannequins in a department store just before it closed for the night. They then got away with stealing 10,000 pounds in merchandise. Jackie Chan's father was a spy while his mother was an opium dealer. They met through an arrest and fell in love. A python from Australia became addicted to meth after living in a drug lab. Police busted the lab before sending the snake to rehab for 7 months. Badass humans of history. During the Vietnam War, a platoon of American soldiers were told to destroy a village that was taken over by the Viet Cong. But instead of aggressors, they found unarmed villagers, most of them women, children, and old men. Acting on initial orders, the soldiers began brutally executing the innocent civilians in broad daylight. After hundreds had been killed, Major Hugh Thompson landed in the area and struggled to figure out what had happened. Upon realizing his fellow American soldiers were responsible, he landed his helicopter between the soldiers and the Vietnamese people. He then told the troops that if they continued the killings, he and his crew would open fire on them. This finally ended the massacre, but Major Thompson was shunned as an American traitor. It wasn't until 1998 that the Army finally acknowledged he had done the right thing. Weird nature fact. A sea sponge and starfish resembling SpongeBob and Patrick were found deep in the Atlantic Ocean. However, this type of starfish is known to prey on sea sponges, so the Patrick-like creature probably had dinner in mind instead of friendship. A Siberian tiger at a zoo in Russia spared the life of a goat that was supposed to be his lunch, and they became best friends. The Silkie is a breed of chicken named for its fluffy feathers that feel like silk. They also make great pets since they're known for their calm and friendly temperament. This animal that looks like a teddy bear is an endangered mammal called the Ely pika. Discovered in 1983 by Li Weidong, they weren't seen for 30 years until Li discovered them again in 2014. It's estimated that there are less than 1,000 of them left in the world. Badass humans of history. Yasuke was a former African slave who arrived in Japan in 1579. His black skin caused such a sensation that a powerful warlord wished to meet him. They developed a friendship, and Yasuke eventually became the first and only black samurai. The Dumbest Ways to Die, Part 6. George Washington died when his doctors were trying to cure his sore throat. They were using a process called bloodletting, which involved draining a patient's blood until their illness was cured. He lost nearly half his blood before they stopped the treatment, and he died a few hours afterwards. 26-year-old Mark Leeson suffocated in his sleep after shoving 2 tampons up his nose before going to bed. Apparently, he was just trying to find a solution for his snoring problem. It's estimated that throughout the world, about 25 people are killed by champagne corks every year. A British student was once taking an exam and couldn't handle the stress and anxiety anymore. So he put 2 pencils up his nostrils and headbutted the desk, forcing the pencils through his brain. He died instantly and all the other students got automatic A's. About 1,000 years ago, a Viking craftsman dropped all of his equipment in a lake on the island of Gotland. In 1936, the perfectly preserved wooden chest containing all of his tools was found at the bottom of the former lake. Here are some sketchy facts about 9/11. Before 9/11, FBI counterterrorism expert John O'Neill urged the federal government to take the threat of Al-Qaeda more seriously. But he was eventually pushed into early retirement due to disagreements with the Bureau. He then went on to head security at the World Trade Center, where he was killed on 9/11. On that same morning, President George Bush's cousin Jim Pierce had a meeting scheduled on the 105th floor of the South Tower. But his group was apparently too large, so they rescheduled the meeting across the street at the last minute. Just months before 9/11, the World Trade Center's lease was sold to Larry Silverstein. Larry then took out an insurance policy that happened to include terrorism in its coverage. After 9/11, he took the insurance company to court and claimed that he should be paid double since there were 2 attacks. He won the case and was awarded $4.5 billion. Weird crime facts. The FBI revealed that in 2003, a man told Kobe Bryant that he would make his accuser disappear for $3 million. Kobe reported the letter to the FBI and the man was arrested. A woman in China once took her ex-boyfriend's car and ran 49 red lights to get revenge on him. In some countries, the mafia will make witnesses disappear so that they can't testify in court. In Colombia, Pablo Escobar made the entire Supreme Court disappear. In 1993, the owner of a Mexican zoo was arrested after purchasing an FBI agent wearing a gorilla suit, thinking it was an actual gorilla. A Coca-Cola corporate secretary once stole their secret recipe and tried to sell it to Pepsi. Instead of acquiring the recipe of their competitors, Pepsi called the feds and had the woman arrested. Insane coincidences. 10-year-old Tilly Smith saved her family and 100 other tourists from the 2004 Asian tsunami that killed over 200,000 people. She was able to recognize the early signs of tsunamis that she learned in geography class just 2 weeks prior. Anne Hathaway's husband bears a strong resemblance to William Shakespeare. Not to mention the name of Shakespeare's wife was Anne Hathaway. Roy Sullivan holds a record that will hopefully never be broken. He was struck by lightning not once, not twice, but 7 times. Bruce Lee once played an actor who was killed by a prop gun. Years later, his son died in real life the exact same way. When there was a drought in Bhopal, India, local priests married 2 frogs to please the gods of rain. Sadly, the frogs had to be divorced 2 months later due to the persistent rainfall that destroyed over 9,000 homes. Insane coincidences. A man from New Jersey bought a $5 bottle of orange juice from ShopRite, which his wife made him return because it was too expensive. He then decided to buy 2 Powerball tickets with the refunded money and ended up winning the $300 million jackpot. This person caught the same exact fish a month and a half later. Harry John Patch was the last surviving soldier from World War I and was briefly the oldest man in Europe. He died at the age of 111 years, 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day. Tom Cruise divorced all 3 of his ex-wives when they turned 33, and each is 11 years younger than the last. The first person to die during the construction of the Hoover Dam was J.G. Tierney on December 20th, 1922. On the same exact day, 14 years later, the last person died. It was J.G. Tierney's son, Patrick. Weird nature facts. While Bigfoot remains an urban legend for now, we know it existed alongside humans at a point in history. Until around 300,000 years ago, Gigantopithecus was a primate that stood more than 10 feet tall and weighed 1,200 pounds. This is how baby elephants drink water. They don't learn how to properly use their trunks until they're around 12 months old. A 400-pound loggerhead turtle named Yoshi set a long-distance record after swimming 23,000 miles over a 2-year span. He swam from Cape Town to Australia to nest after being in captivity for 20 years. This is an amazing photo of a mountain gorilla right before punching the photographer. He was likely drunk from eating bamboo stems and mistook the photographer for a rival. The man now has a scar on his forehead and said it felt like getting hit by a train. Weird crime facts. Eminem's mom once tried to sue him for $10 million over defamation in his music. She ended up settling for $25,000, but $23,000 went to her lawyer. In Germany, denying that the Holocaust ever happened is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Salvador Dali made a painting for the prisoners at Rikers Island that hung in the dining hall for 15 years. In 2003, the painting was stolen by a group of prison guards and was never recovered. The actor who played Zack in School of Rock was arrested in 2019 for stealing 4 guitars over a 5-week span. In the 17th century, Lazarus Colorado was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, but he was later pardoned over a strange technicality thanks to his parasitic twin. Lazarus argued that the death would kill his twin who was innocent. Morbid Facts, Part 152. In 1977, Bob Marley was diagnosed with skin cancer on his toe and was told that having it amputated would stop the spread. But he refused the surgery since his Rastafarian religion saw amputation as a sin. By summer of 1980, the cancer had metastasized throughout Marley's entire body, and he died soon afterwards. When 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo died from the Spanish flu in 1920, her grieving father insisted on her being preserved. Known as the Sleeping Beauty, she was one of the last to be buried in Sicily's Capuchin catacombs. This photo was taken in 1982, 62 years after she died. In the year 2000, a partially paralyzed old man was in his outhouse when the floor suddenly collapsed. He fell through and was immediately surrounded by excrement, spiders, maggots, and rats. He was stuck for more than 3 days until his mailman thankfully found him. Morbid Facts, Part 158. This is a photo of Princess Diana consoling Elton John at the funeral of Gianni Versace. Just over a month later, Diana would die in a car accident and Elton would perform at her funeral. Jean Calment lived to the age of 122 and was the oldest living human in history. She smoked cigarettes for 96 years from the age of 21 and only decided to quit 5 years before she died. If you're ever bitten or scratched by a wild animal, go get a rabies shot immediately. The way rabies kills, once you show symptoms, there's no way to treat it and you will almost certainly die. In 1957, a woman attending an MLB game was hit with a foul ball that broke her nose. The game was briefly paused and resumed once the woman was put on a stretcher. As they carried her away, the very next pitch was fouled off and hit the same woman, breaking a bone in her knee. Morbid Facts, Part 159. If you don't want wrinkles but would prefer to stay away from Botox, this woman has a solution for you. To avoid wrinkles, Tess Christian claims to have not laughed or smiled for more than 40 years, even after the birth of her daughter. The individual animal with the most human kills ever was a tiger from northern India. After a tooth injury from a gunshot left her unable to hunt normal prey, she adjusted her hunting style to go for humans instead. She was shot and killed in 1907 with an estimated 436 human kills. Jeannie Wiley was locked in a room for 13 years by her father, who wanted to protect her from the outside world. He kept her tied in a straitjacket and would bark at her like a wild dog if she made any noise. When she was finally rescued, doctors said she had the cognitive abilities of a 1-year-old baby. Morbid Facts, Part 161. Snake wine has been considered a therapeutic alcoholic beverage for thousands of years in China. It is produced by infusing venomous snakes in grain alcohol and is said to reinvigorate a person. This abandoned fawn was found curled up next to a fake deer that was used for target practice. This is a 1964 photo of Black Reverend Joe Carter preparing to face the Klan after he tried to vote. During tests in South Korea, access to all rooftops are typically locked. This is because students have been known to throw themselves off the roof due to the pressure of the exam. In 2005, one sheep decided to jump off a cliff, causing nearly 1,500 others to follow. However, only the first 450 were killed since the remaining animals' falls were cushioned by the dead bodies below. Morbid Facts, Part 162. Sloths only have enough energy for their weekly toilet trip to the jungle floor. So if their baby ever falls to the ground, they must choose to preserve their energy and leave it to be eaten. In 1971, 17-year-old Julianne Kopka was sucked out of an airplane after it was struck by lightning. She fell 2 miles to the ground, still strapped to her seat, but somehow managed to survive. She then spent the next 11 days alone in the Amazon jungle before being rescued by a logging team. During World War II, Private Thomas Baker was gravely wounded by the Japanese but refused to give up the fight. He told his comrades to leave him propped up against a tree with nothing but a pistol containing 8 bullets. He was later found dead with an empty pistol and the bodies of 8 Japanese soldiers all around him. Here are some insane coincidences involving 9/11. Seth MacFarlane and Mark Wahlberg were both booked to fly on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. Wahlberg decided last minute to fly to Toronto instead, while MacFarlane missed the flight by 10 minutes due to a hangover. Due to technical limitations, video game Deus Ex didn't include the Twin Towers in its skyline. The in-game explanation was that they were destroyed by a terrorist attack. In an episode of Johnny Bravo, there's a poster of a building on fire with the words "Coming Soon." This episode aired in April of 2001, just 5 months before 9/11. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the New York City skyline with the Twin Towers on fire. Most disturbingly, the album was released on September 11, 2001. Weird crime facts. This is a photo of Louise Bundy on the phone with her son Ted just minutes before he was executed. Until the day she died, she believed he was innocent, as her last words to him were, "You'll always be my precious son." In Mexico, the act of escaping from prison is considered legal because the law recognizes that all people have a natural desire to be free. A second grader was suspended for biting a Pop-Tart into the shape of what school officials thought was a gun. In 2019, a man robbed nearly $8,000 from 2 banks in Israel by carrying an avocado that looked like a grenade. Nigerian print scam emails are intentionally filled with typos to filter out all the skeptical recipients. This minimizes false positives and ensures that time is only being spent on the most gullible people. Badass humans of history. In 2010, 35-year-old Gurkha soldier Bishnu Shrestha was sleeping on a train when it was hijacked by 40 armed robbers. Eventually, a group of them reached his seat and woke him up with their knives drawn. He was about to give up his belongings until he noticed a woman near him screaming for help since she was about to be raped. So Bishnu pulled out his kukri machete and killed 3 of the men while injuring 8 others. The woman was brought to safety and her parents offered Bishnu a significant cash reward, but he refused. He told them, "Fighting the enemy in battle is my duty as a soldier, but taking on those thugs on the train was my duty as a human being." Insane coincidences. An Indonesian man became an instant millionaire when a meteorite worth $2 million crashed into his home. The rock is an extremely rare variety that is estimated to be around 4.5 billion years old. Vinny the chestnut horse was born with a perfect white shadow of his own body. A married couple was photographed at the exact same time and place in Disney World 15 years before they even met. They weren't even living in the same country when the photo was taken. A dog from Indiana shot his owner in the foot with a shotgun. The name of the dog was Trigger. In 1784, a Japanese seaman sent a message in a bottle saying that his ship had wrecked. 150 years later, it washed up in the village where he was born. Frayne Selak narrowly survived a fatal train crash, plane crash, 2 car explosions, and being hit by a bus. He then went on to win $1 million in the lottery. Artifact porn. The Hansgavel dagger from Denmark is just under 4,000 years old. It's considered one of the most impressive examples of ancient flint knapping. This 16th century ring from Germany unfolds into an astronomical sphere. The earliest known sunglasses were created by Inuit hunters about 2,000 years ago. They were made to shield their eyes from the blinding glare of sunlight that reflected off the snow. This drawing of a Nosferatu-like creature was found in a 15th century Polish manuscript. The Devil's Bridge is a 19th century bridge in Germany that was designed to make a perfect circle with its reflection. In 2014, the incredibly preserved photograph of a young woman was found in the wreckage of the SS Central America, which sunk during a hurricane in 1857. The woman's identity is unknown, but the photo has been dubbed the Mona Lisa of the Deep. This is the earliest known depiction of Jesus Christ, scratched into a wall around 200 AD by someone who gave him a donkey's head to mock their friend for believing in Jesus. This is the only surviving handwriting of an ancient Roman emperor. It was written by Theodosius II around 430 AD and reads in Latin, "We desire that you be well." This is the only ancient Roman slave tag discovered that's still attached to its collar. Its inscription reads, "I have fled, seize me and return me to Zaninus for 1 gold coin." Here's a pictograph found at Barrier Canyon in the Utah desert depicting a humanoid with bug eyes and antennae. It's at least 2,500 years old. This is the only surviving example of a Ghiornia from the 15th century. This garb was a staple of Italian fashion in the 1400s, with this one belonging to Diego Cavaniglia, who died in 1481. Before it was found near his tomb in 2004, we only knew of gonorrheas through paintings and written records. In 2022, a badger burrowing into a cave in Spain accidentally dug up the largest collection of Roman coins ever found in the region. A local man was walking outside the cave and noticed nearly 100 coins randomly scattered on the ground next to a burrow. So he alerted archaeologists, who eventually found over 100 more ancient coins inside. Most of them date back to 300 AD and were likely hidden there by refugees over 1700 years ago. This apartment in Istanbul has renovations from 3 empires and 1 republic that ruled over the city at different times, all being built on top of each other. In 2016, Spanish man Juan Francisco was making some renovations in his home that resulted in a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. Behind the first wall he removed, he found the facade of a Renaissance-era hospital that was built in the 16th century. Juan immediately alerted archaeologists, who told him it once belonged to St. George's Hospital, a long-forgotten masterpiece by famed Spanish architect Andrés de Vandel-Vera. The structure is more than 30 feet tall and covers several floors of Juan's home. It's unclear as to why such an incredible work was hidden behind the wall of someone's home, but it had likely been that way for centuries. The beloved Bob Ross, who hosted the Joy of Painting in the 70s and 80s, was originally a master drill sergeant in the U.S. Air Force who screamed at men for a living. He was a strict, fearsome leader who became known as Bust-em-up Bobby for his toughness towards subordinates. But Bob later said he didn't actually enjoy this aspect of his job, and promised that if he ever left the military, he would never shout again. This helped him develop the calm and gentle demeanor he became famous for on his painting show. After winning Academy Awards for Best Picture and Director for the movie Gandhi in 1982, Richard Attenborough openly claimed that Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extraterrestrial should have won instead. Spielberg ended up casting him as John Hammond in Jurassic Park to thank him. Hawaiian pizza was invented in Canada by a Greek immigrant who was inspired by Chinese food to put a South American ingredient on an Italian dish. Hawaiian pizza then went on to become the most popular pizza in Australia. Dolly Parton was born dirt poor in a 1-bedroom cabin in the mountains of Tennessee. The home had no electricity or running water, so Dolly and her 11 siblings struggled to stay clean. Their father was a sharecropper who couldn't read and struggled to make ends meet for his many children. As the family grew, the older kids took on more responsibilities, and Dolly, being the 4th of 12 children, had to look after her younger siblings, and would often entertain them with her guitar playing and singing before turning her talents into a career. Much of her music is inspired by her tough upbringing, and today she donates millions to help those in need. It's widely believed that Shrek was modeled after Maurice Tillett, aka the world's ugliest man. He was a celebrated pro wrestler in the 1940s who suffered from acromegaly, a condition that results in bone overgrowth and thickening. DreamWorks has declined to comment on whether or not this is true, despite the uncanny resemblance. Here's the Paramount Pictures logo on the day it was originally painted in 1965. DJ scratching was invented in 1975 when Grand Wizard Theodore would play his records too loudly, prompting his mother to constantly enter his room and scold him. This caused Theodore to hold the record still, accidentally moving it back and forth and liking the sound it made. When he was in high school, comedian Kevin James was a beast at wrestling. He was the top-ranked wrestler at his school, even ahead of his friend and future wrestling superstar Mick Foley, who was ranked second. The two would often face each other in practice as wrestling partners, and Kevin won most of the time. Foley says that when they were teenagers, James was the toughest kid in school, and one of the only kids he knew who could bench press 300 pounds. But Kevin's wrestling dream came to an end when he suffered a severe back injury, allowing Foley to take his spot as the top-ranked wrestler and launch his career of wrestling stardom. James then pushed for a football career until another injury took him out, so he instead settled for a life as a millionaire comedian. The first karaoke machine was built by Japanese nightclub musician Daisuke Inoue in 1971, but he didn't patent his invention because he wanted to teach the world to sing. He earned nothing from the billion-dollar industry he created and says he has no regrets to this day. A Confederate soldier named John Pemberton was stabbed in the chest during the American Civil War. His efforts to control his resulting chronic pain led to a bad addiction to morphine. Attempting to break this habit, Pemberton started mixing various painkillers with carbonated water, and soon developed what would become the most well-known product in the world, Coca-Cola. The original recipe contained cocaine and alcohol and did nothing to curb Pemberton's morphine addiction. Chris Pratt dropped out of community college halfway through his first semester and ended up homeless in Maui. He was a daytime stripper and waited tables at the Bubba Gump Shrimp Factory, where he was eventually discovered by the daughter of Tommy Chong while serving her table. In 1950, an inventor was trying to make a waterproof sock to prevent trench foot in soldiers. Upon crafting a latex-coated sock and filling it with water to test for leaks, he found a rip and threw it on his table in frustration. Instantly pleased with the pop and splash, he decided to market water balloons to children. Jaywalking was invented by car companies in the early 1900s to shift the blame for accidents from motorists to pedestrians. The stethoscope was invented by Dr. René Laennec in 1816 because he wasn't comfortable placing his ear directly onto a woman's chest to listen to her heartbeat. In 1980, Star Wars was releasing a Christmas music album, but producers wanted a better singer for the track R2-D2 We Wish You a Merry Christmas. So they asked the 17-year-old kid who swept the floors at the studio, and he totally nailed it. His name was Jon Bon Jovi, and this marked the beginning of his professional singing career. A San Francisco man tweeted this just 5 minutes before being the victim of a random drive-by shooting. In 2015, a Colombian man had a tapeworm inside of him that got cancer. The cancer then metastasized, and the man eventually died from tumors of tapeworm throughout his entire body. A 24-year-old nurse in India was set on fire by her ex-boyfriend after she rejected his advances. But police say the woman caught hold of him tightly so that he couldn't escape after killing her. While the woman died on the spot, the man suffered for days before succumbing to his injuries during treatment. Morbid Facts, Part 155. 5 hours before he was confirmed to be dead, somebody posted about Michael Jackson's death on Wikipedia with nearly exact details. No one paid attention because everyone thought it was just a prank, so no details about the original poster were ever found. While masks may save human lives, the same can't be said for wildlife. In 2020 alone, an estimated 1.5 billion masks ended up in our oceans. A British teenager was arrested after beating and stabbing 2 girls because they called him Harry Potter. In 2009, a man sued Pepsi when he was traumatized after finding a mouse in his Mountain Dew. But Pepsi attorneys said this was impossible since Mountain Dew would completely dissolve a mouse in 30 days. Pepsi won the case upon showing that the can was purchased 74 days after it was manufactured. Morbid Facts, Part 156. In 1979, the King of Persia ordered the execution of 2 servants for being too loud. But since it was a holiday, he postponed their executions by 1 day and made the servants return to their duties. That night, they assassinated the king in his sleep. The FBI estimates that there are between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the US at any given time. When a person is executed by electric chair, they feel everything. They are fully aware of their bodies being fried as it happens in real time. One inmate who survived the first round of electrocution said it tasted exactly like cold peanut butter. A Japanese schoolgirl once died because a teacher crushed her head in the school gate. The principal said it was the student's fault because the gate had to be closed at exactly 8:30 and she was late. Morbid Facts, Part 157. When Bono was 14, his mother suffered an aneurysm at her own father's funeral and later died. Bono said the grief in his heart at the time was a big part of why he turned to music. A German shepherd named Tommy attends Mass every day at his local church in Italy. This is because his owner had her funeral there and he hopes that one day she will return. Australian vegan Maria Stridham wanted to prove that vegans can do anything by climbing Mount Everest. Sadly, she died while descending as a result of severe altitude sickness. In 1929, 2 scientists at Princeton University successfully turned a live cat into a telephone. They connected its auditory nerve to a transmitter, and when one researcher spoke through the cat's ear, the other could hear it through the receiver. The experiment was viewed as groundbreaking and led to the invention of cochlear implants. In 1998, Lenny Dieriksen was eating breakfast with his 19-year-old son when a stranger suddenly showed up at their Oklahoma farm. Lenny went out and spoke with the man for several minutes, before coming back inside and telling his son that the man wanted to look at one of his stud horses. But after leaving his home in the man's truck, Lenny never returned. He was apparently seen having lunch with the stranger at a local coffee shop a few hours later, but the trail went cold as the stud horse that Lenny mentioned was never visited that day. 6 months later, someone called 911 claiming he saw Lenny at a local bar, but he was gone before police could get there. The case remains unsolved to this day. In New Brunswick, Canada in 2013, 2 little boys were strangled to death by a 100-pound python while at a sleepover at their friend's house. The snake apparently snuck into the apartment through a vent connected to a pet shop below the boys' room. Experts claimed it's highly unlikely for a python to just go on a human killing spree, but the boys had gone to a petting zoo earlier in the day, so they may have smelled like food to the snake. The snake was euthanized, and the snake's owner was eventually found not guilty of negligent homicide. In 2013, well-respected meteorologist Tim Samaras became the first storm chaser killed by a tornado along with his son Paul and friend Carl. The Oklahoma tornado expanded from 1 mile to 2.6 miles in about 30 seconds and was the largest ever recorded. It suddenly took a sharp turn towards the group, leaving them screaming their last words over the radio, "We're gonna die." These were the final photos of extreme cave diver Dave Shaw just moments before his final dive into South Africa's Bushman's Hole. He blacked out at 872 feet while retrieving a fellow diver's body, and his helmet cam recorded his demise. Osama bin Laden's son Omar was severely beaten by his father for smiling too widely when he was a young boy. He trained in Al-Qaeda camps starting at 14 years old, but left the terrorist organization in 2000 since he didn't support the idea of killing innocent civilians. In 2006, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after surgeons spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years to the point where her skin had completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail in her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. According to his memoir, when Vice President J.D. Vance was 12 years old, his drug-addicted mother was once driving erratically and threatened to crash her car to kill them both. J.D. had no choice but to jump out of the speeding vehicle and run to a nearby house for help. He now refers to this event as a turning point in his life, since it prompted him to move in with his non-abusive grandmother and work towards a more stable life. In the year 2000, Mexican woman Ines Ramirez performed an hour-long C-section on herself after suffering 12 hours of constant pain. Using a large kitchen knife, she made a 7-inch vertical incision and pulled the baby boy out of her own uterus. Despite no prior medical training, both Ramirez and her baby miraculously survived. In 1996, 16-year-old Travis Lewis pleaded guilty to the murder of Sally McKay. While seeking closure, Sally's daughter Martha visited Travis several times in prison and eventually forgave him for killing her mother. When he was released on parole 23 years later, Martha allowed Travis to move in with her and gave him a job as groundskeeper of her estate. But when she realized the man was frequently stealing from her, Martha fired Travis and kicked him out. Soon afterwards, Travis broke into Martha's home and stabbed her to death before drowning in a nearby lake while running from police. This man died after making the dumbest mistake of his life while camping out in Alaska. In 1981, American wildlife photographer Carl McCunn hired a bush pilot to drop him off in the Alaskan wilderness. He planned on camping by himself for 5 months to take photographs of wildlife, but would soon realize he'd forgotten to arrange for a return flight. As the weather grew colder and his supplies began to dwindle, Carl soon realized that he may never return home. At one point after he lost all hope, Carl was seen by an Alaskan state trooper plane but was ignored because he raised his fist in celebration, and a raised fist is known to be a signal that everything's okay. Referring to this incident, Carl wrote in his journal, "It's certainly my fault I'm here now. Man, I can't believe it. I really feel like a klutz. Now I know why nobody's shown up since." Carl's campsite and corpse were found a few weeks later, along with his journal which detailed his harrowing final months. In February of last year, famed adult star Emily Willis was left permanently disabled after a health crisis at the facility that was treating her ketamine addiction. She'd reportedly been clean for several days when her health began to rapidly decline. and the rehab center allegedly failed to provide her with the proper care. Willis was barely eating or drinking while suffering from severe headaches, anxiety, night terrors, and a UTI. She eventually suffered a heart attack and wasn't taken to the hospital quickly enough, forcing paramedics to perform CPR for more than 30 minutes, resulting in oxygen deprivation and irreversible brain damage. Willis entered a vegetative state for 2 months and now suffers from locked-in syndrome, a condition where the patient is conscious but can't move any muscles except those that control eye movements. Her family is now suing the rehab center, alleging medical negligence, inadequate supervision, and delayed emergency intervention, which they claim led to her awful permanent condition. The great Harry Houdini once escaped a prison cell while fully nude to show that he wasn't hiding anything to help his escape. But the guards who checked him apparently failed to fully inspect him, since Houdini was hiding the key up his chocolate starfish. Pubic wigs known as merkins were worn by prostitutes as early as the 15th century. The purpose for this accessory was that pubic hair was once considered popular and attractive, but sex workers often shaved their lower parts to avoid pubic lice, and these merkins also helped them cover up signs of STDs from their clients. Early colonizers of the United States commonly used corn cobs as toilet paper, since they were soft, plentiful, and the grooves were quite efficient at getting the job done. The Roman Emperor Elagabalus was only 14 when he assumed power and would often prostitute himself in taverns and brothels. He would frequently stand around naked while swinging his ding-a-ling and would offer vast sums of money to any doctor who could give him a vagina. He was killed at age 19, and his only positive legacy was the invention of the whoopee cushion, which he would use on unsuspecting dinner guests.